The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above the gathering of alien representatives. 12 different species sat around the massive crystal table that glowed with soft blue light. The air buzzed with tension as voices rose and fell in heated discussion. At the center of it all sat the humans, looking small and quiet compared to their alien counterparts. Ambassador Z-Tar of the Valorian Empire drummed his 6 fingers on the table surface. His reptilian features showed clear annoyance as he stared at the human delegation. Beside him, Hive Queen Zenth clicked her sharp mandibles together in a rhythm that sounded like angry music. Her insect-like eyes never left the humans either. Council. Prime Velther raised his hand for silence. His blue skin rippled with patterns that showed his growing frustration. When the hall finally quieted, he spoke in his deep voice that carried easily through the vast space. "The humans continue to refuse our standard combat trials," he announced to the assembly. "They claim their species values peace above all else. They say they are diplomats, not warriors." A wave of scoffing sounds filled the hall. Every species present had earned their seat on the council through demonstrations of military might. They had proven their worth in battle simulations that tested strategy, strength, and the will to survive. The humans seemed determined to avoid such tests completely. Lieutenant Commander Jake Miller sat in the human section, his face calm despite the hostile atmosphere. Years of military service had taught him to stay cool under pressure. Next to him, Dr. Lisa Carter quietly reviewed data on her tablet. She was studying the parameters of what the aliens called their ultimate war simulation. Jake had read the files too. The simulation was brutal and unforgiving. It placed warriors in realistic combat scenarios where only the strongest and smartest survived. Most species sent their very best fighters to prove their worth. The humans had been invited to participate 3 times already. Each time they had politely declined. "Perhaps we should make this more interesting," Sektar said with a smile that showed too many sharp teeth. "The humans claim they can succeed without violence. Let them prove it. We will strip them of all advanced weapons and armor. Give them only what a civilian might carry." Murmurs of approval rippled through the alien delegates. This was clearly a trap, but it was also an opportunity. Dr. Carter leaned forward with interest. "What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador?" she asked. Velther's skin patterns shifted to show pleasure at the question. "A modified version of our ultimate simulation. 1 human participant faces 50 of our finest warriors from across the galaxy. The human gets only basic survival tools, the kind any civilian might have for daily needs. Our warriors receive full combat equipment." Jake and Lisa exchanged a quick look. They both understood what was happening. This was meant to humiliate humanity and justify excluding them from the council permanently. The aliens expected their human participant to fail quickly and dramatically. "There would be conditions," Jake said, standing slowly from his chair. His voice carried clearly across the hall, despite speaking at normal volume. "If we agree to this test, I choose what equipment I bring." The laughter that followed was harsh and grating. Different species made different sounds, but the mockery was universal. They found the idea of a human making demands both amusing and insulting. "Agreed, human," Velther said when the laughter died down. "Choose whatever pathetic civilian tool you wish. It will make no difference against plasma weapons and energy shields." Jake reached into his uniform pocket with deliberate slowness. Every eye in the hall followed his movement. He pulled out a simple piece of metal and held it up for all to see. It was a standard military mess hall spoon made of plain stainless steel. Nothing fancy or high-tech about it at all. The laughter stopped immediately. Silence filled the great hall as alien representatives stared at the simple eating utensil. Several species began making sounds that might have been confusion or disbelief. "This will do nicely," Jake said, turning the spoon over in his hand to examine it. Standard issue, good balance, decent steel construction. About 6 inches long with a comfortable grip. "You cannot be serious," Zektar hissed. His reptilian features twisted with what looked like genuine concern. "You would face 50 armed warriors with an eating implement? I would face 50 armed warriors with a tool," Jake corrected him. "The difference is important." Dr. Carter smiled as she watched the alien reactions. They clearly thought the human had lost his mind. None of them understood what Jake was really saying. They saw a spoon and thought of food. Jake saw a spoon and thought of possibilities. Hive Queen Zenth leaned forward, her compound eyes glittering. "Human, you do understand this is a combat simulation. Your opponents will have weapons designed to eliminate you quickly and efficiently. They will show no mercy." "I understand completely," Jake replied. "When do we start?" Velther looked around the hall at his fellow council members. Some seemed worried that they were being too harsh. Others appeared eager to watch the human fail spectacularly. After a moment of silent communication, he nodded. "The simulation will begin in 1 hour," he announced. "Preparation chambers are available if you need them. The arena will be a full urban environment with realistic physics and environmental hazards. Victory condition is simple. Eliminate all opponents or survive until they are all eliminated." Jake pocketed his spoon and followed a council aide toward the preparation areas. Behind him, the alien delegates began discussing what they had just witnessed. Many seemed confused by the humans' confidence. A few looked genuinely worried. Dr. Carter gathered her materials and prepared to monitor the simulation from the observation deck. She had worked with Jake for 3 years and knew his background well. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a military engineer specializing in battlefield improvisation. His service record included 17 commendations for creative problem-solving. Under extreme conditions, the aliens saw a human with a spoon. Lisa saw a tactical genius with a precision instrument. She suspected the next few hours would be very educational for the Galactic Council. As Jake entered the preparation chamber, he was already thinking ahead. The spoon in his pocket was not just an eating utensil. It was a lever, a conductor, a projectile, a cutting tool, and a symbol of human adaptability. More importantly, it was a reminder that the greatest weapon any warrior could possess was not technology or strength, but the ability to see potential where others saw only limitations. Simulation would begin soon, and 50 alien warriors would learn something new about humanity. The world materialized around Jake in a flash of blue light and electric buzzing. One moment he stood in the sterile preparation chamber. The next he found himself in the middle of what looked like a war zone. Buildings stretched up on all sides, their walls cracked and broken from explosions. Smoke drifted through the air like gray ghosts, carrying the smell of burnt metal and concrete dust. Jake took a deep breath and looked around slowly. The simulation had placed him in what appeared to be the ruins of a large cafeteria. Overturned tables and chairs lay scattered across the floor like fallen dominoes. Broken glass crunched under his boots as he moved toward the serving area. Behind the counter, he could see into a commercial kitchen that still had most of its equipment intact. He pulled the spoon from his pocket and felt its weight in his hand. The metal was cool against his palm, and the balance felt right. 6 inches of stainless steel that most people would use to eat soup or ice cream. Jake saw something completely different when he looked at it. "Simulation commences in 10 seconds, a voice announced through speakers hidden in the ceiling. "Remember, human participant, this is elimination combat. Your 50 opponents have plasma rifles, energy blades, and full armor enhancement suits. They have been instructed to show no mercy." Jake was already moving toward the kitchen area, his eyes scanning everything he saw. Gas lines ran along the walls, clearly marked with yellow paint. Chemical storage cabinets stood near the back wall, their contents labeled in the universal symbols used throughout the galaxy. Most interesting of all, he noticed that the building structure showed signs of battle damage that created weak points he could exploit. "Copy that, Control," Jake said into the air. "Quick question, though. Are there any restrictions on how I can use items I find in the environment?" A pause followed his question. Jake could imagine the alien observers discussing his request. Finally, the voice returned. "Negative. All environmental elements are considered available for tactical use. Standard simulation protocols apply." Jake smiled for the first time since entering the arena. "Perfect. Thank you for clarifying." The countdown reached 0, and a deep horn sound echoed across the battlefield. Immediately, Jake heard the distinctive whine of plasma weapons charging up in the distance. Energy bolts began flying between buildings as the alien warriors started their hunt. Their confident voices carried on the wind as they communicated in various languages. Jake ignored the chaos outside and focused on his immediate surroundings. He had maybe 10 minutes before the first hunters reached his location. Time enough to prepare if he moved quickly and efficiently. The gas lines were his first priority. Using the spoon's narrow end, he began carefully loosening fittings at key junction points. Not enough to cause explosions, but sufficient to create controllable leaks that could be ignited when needed. The spoon's metal construction made it perfect for this kind of precision work. Next, he examined the chemical storage area. Industrial cleaning supplies, food preservatives, and maintenance compounds filled the shelves. Jake selected several containers and began mixing small amounts in empty food containers. His military engineering background included extensive training in improvised explosives and chemical reactions. Most civilians would see bottles of cleaning fluid. Jake saw the components for smoke screens, corrosive agents, and flashbang substitutes. Building structural damage caught his attention next. Several support beams showed stress fractures from whatever battle had originally damaged this place. Using the spoon as a precision tool, Jake began scoring specific points along these weakened areas. A few careful cuts in exactly the right spots could cause controlled collapses that would trap or eliminate enemies. Heavy footsteps announced the arrival of his first opponent. Jake heard the distinctive breathing pattern of a Valorian warrior approaching the cafeteria entrance. Their species was known for their aggressive tactics and advanced armor suits that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Jake quickly climbed onto a preparation counter and pulled himself up into the ventilation system above the kitchen. The spoon went between his teeth as he used both hands to navigate through the metal ducts. From this position, he could see the entire cafeteria through ventilation grills while remaining invisible to scanning equipment. The Valorian warrior burst through the main entrance with his plasma rifle ready. His armor gleamed with energy. Shielding and his helmet display showed various targeting systems actively scanning for heat signatures. He moved like a professional, checking corners and potential hiding spots with military precision. Jake watched from above as the warrior searched the dining area. The alien was good at his job, but he was thinking in terms of conventional combat. He expected his target to be hiding behind overturned furniture or crouching in obvious concealment spots. It never occurred to him to look up. The warrior moved deeper into the cafeteria, following protocols designed for hunting armed opponents. His scanner showed trace heat signatures from Jake's earlier presence, but could not pinpoint his current location. The human had deliberately touched multiple surfaces to confuse thermal tracking. Jake carefully positioned himself above a specific spot where two gas lines met near a structural weak point he had prepared. The warrior passed directly underneath, still scanning left and right, but never looking up. Jake dropped silently from the ventilation shaft, Landing behind his opponent with practiced quiet, the spoon came out of his mouth and into his hand in one smooth motion. Jake had studied Valorian anatomy during his diplomatic training. Their armor was nearly impenetrable, but like all species, they had vulnerable points where plates met and sensors needed access to outside air. A quick thrust with the spoon's handle to the base of the skull, right where the armor's neck joint, created a small gap, and the warrior collapsed immediately. The simulation's safety protocols prevented permanent injury, but the alien was definitely eliminated from the contest. One down, Jake whispered to himself as he quickly stripped useful items from the unconscious warrior. The communication device would be helpful, and the energy pack from the rifle could power several of his improvised devices. 49 opponents remained, and Jake could hear more of them approaching from different directions. They had heard their comrades' armor hit the floor and were converging on his location. Time to put his preparations to good use. Jake activated the first gas leak and used the energy pack to create a spark. Controlled flames began spreading along predetermined paths, filling the area with smoke and creating the illusion of a much larger fire. While his enemies dealt with what appeared to be a dangerous blaze, Jake was already moving to his next. Positioned through routes he had planned in advance, the real battle was just beginning. 3 hours had passed since the simulation began, and the great hall of the Galactic Council had fallen completely silent. Every alien representative stared at the massive viewing screens that showed the urban battlefield from multiple angles. What they witnessed defied everything they understood about combat tactics and military strategy. Jake Miller had transformed the ruined cafeteria into a maze of deadly traps using nothing but his spoon and the materials around him. The simple eating utensil had become a precision instrument in his hands, allowing him to redirect gas lines, weaken structural supports, and create improvised weapons from cleaning supplies and kitchen equipment. Commander Zektar watched in, growing disbelief as 3 more of his finest Valorian soldiers fell victim to Jake's latest creation. The human had used his spoon to carefully scrape away material from specific stress points in the floor above the dining area. When the heavily armored aliens walked across the weakened section, the entire floor collapsed under their weight, dropping them into what had once been a storage basement. The fall alone would not have eliminated them, but Jake had prepared for that possibility too. The basement now contained a mixture of industrial adhesive and expanding foam that he had combined using precise measurements. The 3 warriors found themselves completely immobilized, their advanced armor useless against the simple chemical. Trap. This cannot be happening, Zektar muttered, his reptilian features twisted with confusion and growing respect. He is defeating trained killers with basic physics and chemistry. Hive Queen Zenth leaned forward in her chair, her compound eyes reflecting the light from the screens. How does he know exactly where to strike? Every action he takes seems perfectly calculated. Dr. Lisa Carter smiled from her position in the human delegation area. She had been monitoring Jake's progress with growing pride, though she was not surprised by his success. Lieutenant Commander Miller specialized in battlefield engineering before his diplomatic assignment. His military record includes situations where he built functioning communication equipment from scrap metal and disabled enemy vehicles using common household chemicals. On the main screen, Jake had moved to the industrial section of the simulated city. This area contained manufacturing equipment, chemical storage tanks, and a complex network of pipes and electrical conduits. 6 Krellian hunters had cornered him on a metal platform suspended above a series of processing vats. The Krellians were known throughout the galaxy for their hunting skills and coordinated pack tactics. Each warrior carried an energy spear and wore targeting systems that could track movement in complete darkness. They had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around Jake. Cutting off all apparent escape routes, Jake stood calmly in the center. of their formation, his spoon held loosely in his right hand. He appeared completely relaxed, despite being surrounded by deadly opponents who could strike from any direction. The Krellians raised their weapons, confident that this human had finally made a fatal mistake. "Gentlemen," Jake said in a conversational tone that carried clearly in the quiet industrial space, "you might want to check your footing." The Krellians looked down in confusion, not understanding the human's calm warning. That moment of distraction was exactly what Jake needed. He struck his spoon against a specific point on the metal grating beneath their feet, creating a sharp ringing sound that echoed through the industrial complex. The sound was not random noise. Jake had spent the previous 20 minutes using his spoon to carefully score the support struts that held the platform in place. Each cut had been precisely calculated to create a cascading failure that would activate when the right amount of pressure was applied at exactly the correct spot. The entire platform collapsed in sections, dropping the 6 Krellian hunters toward the processing area below. But Jake had not left their fate to chance. During his reconnaissance of the industrial section, he had discovered that one of the vats contained a fast-setting industrial adhesive, used in construction projects. Using his spoon as a precision tool, Jake had redirected the flow controls on several pipes to ensure that the adhesive vat would be positioned directly beneath the platform when it collapsed. The 6 hunters fell straight into the thick, sticky substance that immediately began hardening around their bodies. Within minutes, the Krellians found themselves completely trapped in a substance harder than concrete. Their energy spears were useless, and their targeting systems could not help them escape from what had become an impromptu prison. How did he know the adhesive would be in the right place? Zektar demanded, his voice rising with frustration and something that might have been fear. Lisa checked her monitoring data before answering. He did not know for certain. Jake created multiple backup plans for every possible scenario. If the adhesive had not been positioned correctly, the fall itself would have eliminated them. If the platform had not collapsed as planned, he had already identified 17 other ways to neutralize them using the available environmental factors. The alien observers exchanged worried glances. This was not luck or even exceptional skill. The human was demonstrating a completely different approach to warfare that seemed to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity and every limitation into a weapon. On the screens, Jake had already moved to his next position. He climbed down from the remaining portion of the platform, using pipes and electrical conduits as handholds. His spoon went back into his pocket as he surveyed the industrial complex for his next encounter with the remaining alien warriors. 35 opponents had been eliminated through traps, environmental manipulation, and tactical misdirection. Jake had not fired a single shot or engaged in direct combat with any of them. Instead, he had turned their own advantages against them by using their expectations and training patterns to predict their movements. The surviving warriors were beginning to adapt to his methods, but adaptation took time they did not have. Jake was always 3 steps ahead, planning his next moves while executing his current strategy. Every action served multiple purposes, and every trap contained backup options for different possible outcomes, not in the council chamber, even the most. Skeptical alien representatives were starting to understand what they were witnessing. This human was not just surviving against superior numbers and technology. He was dominating the battlefield through pure intellectual superiority and creative problem-solving abilities that none of them had encountered before. The simple spoon in Jake's pocket had become a symbol of something much larger and more dangerous than any plasma weapon or energy blade. It represented the human capacity to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles, to find solutions where others found only problems. 15 more warriors remained active in the simulation, and they were about to learn that their real enemy had never been the man with the spoon. Their enemy was the mind that wielded it. 27 warriors remained active in the simulation, and they had learned to fear the human with the spoon. Word had spread among the survivors about Jake's unconventional methods. They spoke in hushed tones about platforms that collapsed. Without warning, floors that gave way at precisely the wrong moment, and chemical traps that appeared from nowhere to eliminate their comrades. The remaining aliens had regrouped in the simulation's central plaza, a wide-open area with minimal cover and few obvious environmental hazards. Commander Thek of the Valorian forces had taken charge of the survivors. His tactical training told him that open ground would neutralize the humans' advantage by removing the complex environments that Jake had been exploiting. The warriors formed a defensive perimeter in the center of the plaza, their weapons pointed outward in all directions. Advanced scanning equipment swept the surrounding buildings continuously, searching for any sign of the elusive human. Their plasma rifles hummed with energy, ready to fire at the first glimpse of movement. "He cannot use his tricks here," Thek announced to his mixed group of survivors. No gas lines to redirect, no structural weak points to exploit, no chemical storage to raid, just open ground and clear sight lines. Jake observed them from the roof of a nearby building, using a piece of reflective metal he had polished with his spoon to avoid exposing himself to their thermal scanners. He counted their positions, noted their weapon types, and identified the command structure they had established. Most importantly, he studied their psychology. The aliens were thinking like conventional soldiers, because that was their training. They expected direct confrontation, ranged combat, and tactical superiority through better equipment. They had positioned themselves to counter everything they understood about warfare, but they still did not understand what they were really fighting against. "They are learning," Jake murmured to himself as he watched their defensive formation. "Time to teach them something completely new." The human climbed down into the building's interior and began his most ambitious project yet. The structure contained the simulation's main power distribution center, with electrical systems that fed energy throughout the entire urban environment. Using his spoon as both a cutting tool and a conductor, Jake began the delicate process of rewiring these systems for a purpose their designers had never intended. Meanwhile, the tension in the plaza grew as minutes passed without any sign of their enemy. The alien warriors shifted nervously, their weapons tracking empty shadows and false movements. Their thermal scanners showed Jake's heat signature moving through the building, but the thick walls prevented them from getting clear targeting solutions. "He is planning something," growled Commander Thek, his reptilian eyes never leaving the building where Jake had disappeared. "We should attack before he can prepare another trap." "No," replied Senior Hunter Kess of the Krellian survivors. "That is exactly what he wants us to do. Every time we have acted aggressively, we have played directly into his hands. This human thinks several moves ahead of us." Jake's voice suddenly echoed across the plaza from hidden speakers located throughout the area. The warriors spun in circles, trying to locate the source of the sound, but the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Attention, warriors of the galaxy," Jake's calm voice said. "I want to make you an offer that you should consider carefully." The aliens raised their weapons, scanning desperately for any target. Their advanced sensors detected no movement, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic emissions that might reveal Jake's location. He had become a ghost speaking from the very air around them. "You have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior firepower," Jake continued, his voice carrying easily across the open space. "But I have something that you do not understand. I have the ability to see potential where you see only limitations." As he spoke, Jake was putting the finishing touches on his masterpiece. The power distribution center had become a massive electromagnetic pulse generator through creative rewiring and some inspired applications of basic electrical theory. The building's entire energy grid would discharge simultaneously, creating a localized EEP effect that would disable every piece of advanced technology in the plaza. The fundamental difference between us is not our tools or our training, Jake explained to his captive audience. The difference is our perspective on problem solving. You look at a spoon and think it is useless in combat. I look at the same spoon and see a lever, a conductor, a projectile, a precision instrument, and a symbol of human adaptability. The alien warriors exchanged uncertain glances. Several species began making nervous sounds as they realized they could not predict what the human would do next. Their tactical training had not prepared them for psychological warfare, combined with environmental manipulation on this scale. Your weapons are designed to destroy, Jake continued, his voice taking on an almost teaching tone. This simple eating utensil was designed to nourish. That tells you everything you need to know about the differences between our civilizations and our approaches to solving problems. Commander Vec tried to trace the audio signal to its source, but Jake had routed his voice through multiple speakers using the building's internal communication system. The human could be anywhere or nowhere, speaking from any of dozens of possible locations. Jake reached for the final switch in his improvised EMP system. I am going to demonstrate something that your advanced military academies probably never taught you. Sometimes the most effective weapon is not the one that causes the most damage. Sometimes the most effective weapon is the one that removes your enemy's ability to cause damage at all. The electromagnetic pulse erupted across the plaza like invisible lightning. Every piece of advanced technology within the blast radius immediately went dark. Plasma rifles stopped humming, armor suits lost power, communication systems died, and targeting scanners went blank. 27 of the galaxy's finest warriors found themselves standing in an open plaza, with nothing but their natural abilities. Jake emerged from the building, walking calmly across the plaza toward the group of stunned aliens. His spoon caught the simulated sunlight as he held it casually in his right hand. He looked completely relaxed, as if he had just finished eating lunch instead of orchestrating the most unconventional military victory in galactic history: surrender. Now, he said simply, stopping just outside their reach, and I will be happy to show you how to make breakfast with this thing. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of alien weapons clattering to the ground. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into complete chaos as the simulation ended and the screens went dark. Representatives from 12 different species shouted accusations across the crystal table, their voices mixing together in a symphony of confusion and anger. Some demanded immediate technical reviews of the simulation parameters. Others called for rematches with different rules. And several insisted that the human had somehow cheated. Council. Prime Velther slammed his ceremonial gavel against the table repeatedly, the crystal surface ringing like a bell under the impacts. His blue skin rippled with patterns that showed extreme agitation as he tried to restore order to the assembly. Silence. He roared, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. The parameters were clearly established and agreed upon by all parties present. The human completed the objective within the rules that we ourselves created. Commander Zektar rose from his seat, his reptilian features twisted with frustration and something that looked like wounded pride. But he did not fight in any way we recognize as combat. He used deception, tricks, and environmental manipulation. Instead of facing our warriors with honor, Jake stepped forward from the human delegation area, the simple spoon still visible in his right hand. Despite having just defeated 50 of the galaxy's finest warriors, he looked completely calm and unruffled. His uniform was clean, his breathing was steady, and his expression showed nothing but polite attention. With respect, Commander Zektar, Jake said in the same conversational tone he had used throughout the simulation, I used tactics and strategy. Every action I took followed the same physical laws that govern your plasma weapons and energy shields. The only difference is that I applied those laws in ways you did not expect. Dr. Lisa Carter activated a holographic display that filled the space above the crystal table. The three-dimensional images showed detailed breakdowns of Jake's improvisations throughout the simulation. Each trap, each environmental manipulation, and each tactical decision was analyzed and explained in terms that even civilian observers could understand. Lieutenant Commander Miller demonstrated 17 different applications of basic physics. Lisa explained as the images rotated slowly above their heads. He used 11 chemical reactions involving common compounds that any species would recognize. He performed 32 examples of structural engineering using only environmental materials and a simple eating utensil. The alien representatives stared at the holographic display with growing understanding. Every solution Jake had implemented was based on fundamental scientific principles that their own civilizations had mastered thousands of years ago. The difference was not in the knowledge itself, but in how that knowledge was applied. A remarkable thing, Lisa continued, is that everything you see here represents the kind of creative problem-solving that humans consider completely routine. We teach these principles to our children in basic education programs. Hive Queen Zenth clicked her mandibles thoughtfully as she studied the display. Your species approaches challenges from directions we never considered. You see possibilities, where we see only obstacles and limitations. Jake nodded respectfully to the insectoid queen. That is exactly the point, Your Majesty. You asked us to prove our worthiness for the Galactic Council through demonstrations of combat prowess. We have shown you something that we believe is more valuable than firepower or armor. We have shown you adaptive intelligence. He held up the simple spoon, now slightly scratched and worn from its unlikely service as a multi-purpose tool. The metal caught the chamber's lights as he turned it slowly for all to see. When you limited me to civilian equipment, you thought you were removing my options and forcing me into a hopeless situation. Instead, you gave me infinite possibilities to explore. This spoon did not make me dangerous to your warriors. My training, my creativity, and my willingness to think beyond conventional parameters made me dangerous. The spoon was simply the instrument I used to express those capabilities. Ambassador Krell of the Faxian Republic leaned forward with obvious curiosity. What would you have accomplished if we had allowed you to bring actual weapons into the simulation? Jake smiled for the first time since the session began. Honestly, it probably would have made the whole thing much more boring for everyone involved. When you have overwhelming firepower, you tend to rely on it instead of developing more elegant solutions. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from learning to work with limitations rather than trying to work around them. The chamber fell quiet as the alien representatives considered his words. Many of them had built their entire military philosophies around acquiring more powerful weapons and stronger defenses. The idea that limitations could actually increase effectiveness was completely foreign to their way of thinking. Velthur studied the human delegation with new respect visible in his expression. The Council recognizes that humanity has demonstrated capabilities that would be valuable to our alliance. However, we must ask what you would contribute to our mutual defense efforts. We can teach, Jake replied immediately. We can show your military forces how to think creatively about problems that seem impossible to solve. We can demonstrate how to turn disadvantages into advantages and how to find solutions using resources that others might overlook. The voting process that followed was surprisingly quick. One by one, each species cast their decision through the chamber's electronic systems. When the final tally appeared on the main display, the result was unanimous. Humanity had earned full membership in the Galactic Council, but the aliens had added an unexpected provision to their acceptance. Jake Miller would be invited to establish a new training program for Council military forces, teaching the art of creative problem-solving and adaptive strategy to officers from across the galaxy. As the formal session concluded, Commander Zektar approached the human delegation with obvious reluctance but genuine respect. "Tell me honestly, Miller, was that spoon really your first choice for equipment, or did you have something else in mind?" Jake chuckled quietly and slipped the battered spoon back into his uniform pocket. "Actually, Commander, I was hoping you would let me bring a paperclip instead. You can do absolutely amazing things with a good paperclip if you understand leverage and electrical conductivity." Zektar's reptilian features went pale, and he made a mental note to ensure that paperclips were immediately added to the restricted items list for all future military simulations. In the end, humanity had earned their place among the stars, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through superior adaptability and creative thinking. Somewhere in the galaxy, a simple eating utensil had become a legend, proof that the most powerful weapon in the universe would always be the human mind when it was properly applied. The Galactic Council would never look at basic tools the same way again.